Okay, here we go. Welcome to FahrenheitAI. I wanted to present AI and how it's affecting our lives with a project. In this first episode, I went to Midjourney and I wanted to do something that would allow me to create variation, and I got hooked on the idea of this heron. If I could make a subtle variation of the heron on a t-shirt, it would translate into a repeatable image that was more interesting and intricate. I used one of Midjourney's tools and let the variation be minimal. I settled on this design because it was intricate and feathery and it looked nice. I kept making these slight variations very subtle so I could use them to build out a piece of artwork that would show a heron, but it was different birds on every shirt. Then I tried to feed the heron back into Midjourney using the describe function. The concept here was to see what Midjourney would come up with based on its own artwork. Much of what it generated was strange and too abstract for the project. I reverted back to the original concept of the heron that I liked, and I continued to run more variation and more descriptions. I was trying to see if I could modify it slightly, and Very Subtle was the best tool inside of Midjourney for creating the heron variations that I ended up using for the project. Once I had decided on some variations that I liked and fit the overall concept, I enlarged those and took them through let'senhance.io, which is another AI, which allows Midjourney art to be high enough resolution for printing on t-shirts. By doing that, I had 3 variations I was ready to take into Photoshop for modification. In Photoshop, I decided to use the new neural filters to color map these different birds. I did use the custom presets. I also played around with some of the load-in files. It could be really interesting to load in a file that Midjourney created using the colors you want to implement and then have that mapped onto the artwork you've generated. I applied neural filters to 3 different herons, and I ended up with this kind of bright, vibrant range of color that I could use in the next stage of artwork development, which included AI-generated text, Adobe Illustrator. Adding hops that were Midjourney generated, I developed it for a brewing company called the Great Blue Heron Brewing Company, and the t-shirts all represented one of the different brews. So they were named after brews, and the nicknames were for great blue herons, which apparently are the bellwether of the watershed. When a great blue heron population is affected, it's representative of the entire watershed, which was really interesting. So I did a bellwether IPA and a couple of others, which you'll see. It was also exciting that my iPhone popped up with a new AI tool for text messaging from Grammarly. I noticed it and played around. The idea is that you can speak to your phone in a text message, which we all do, and that would edit your speech to remove any awkwardness. When I noticed it, it was making the input a lot more enthusiastic than I had intended it to be. So if I said to my husband, "Hey, I'm going to make dinner. When you get here, you can have pizza," it would say, "Hey, when do you get home today? You can have some pizza and I will make it for you." It just seemed inauthentic. There was a lot of extra punctuation. It may be in its first version and will improve as time progresses. We've seen Midjourney doing this, and Photoshop AI generation is improving as well. Right now, I'm talking to you through an AI tool called Descript, which scripts the recording of my voice, and then I can edit it to make it more comprehensive for a listener and remove any pauses or awkward noises in the background through the text. I've noticed inside this beta version of Photoshop where I'm playing around with AI generation and these neural filters that I get a lot of screen interference. Sections of my screen aren't generating, and I wonder if it's because my Mac is old or if the beta isn't running well, but I only notice it inside of Photoshop beta or Adobe Illustrator beta. I've gone through and made each of the herons, and now you can see the final artwork with the hops and the different names for the herons. There's the gillywhomper, the bellwether, and the shagpoke. So those are all nicknames for great blue herons. I'm going into Photoshop and making sure that all of these files align well with each other. Then I'm creating underbases so that they can be printed on hybrid. Right now, I'm converting to a custom CMYK build to extract the black channel for the underbase for the white. I've created a gray underbase that will go down first. Then I will build out a halftone white and a dither white so that as it's printed, we can select which one to use. Sometimes when printing hybrid, a digital spray marries well to a dither dot because they both have a stochastic style of imaging versus a halftone frequency. Halftone creates a specific pattern which can be picked up by the eye with sawtoothing or if the spray does not overlap entirely from the digital application. Also, if the spray overlaps too much, you can create a dark halo. By doing both the dither and the halftone in this case, I can cover the bases as we go into this project. I've also developed an underbase that might allow me to print all three of these on a single underbase setup. It's a bit of an experiment, but with the dither at 100% and the halftone blended in, I can camouflage some of the transitions between the three birds. Like I said, the fascinating aspect is the similarity, but that each item is distinctly unique. A customer could buy all three, or if this was used for shirts tailored to individuals, everyone would get a unique shirt. You can vary subtle as many times in Midjourney as you want. You could create a whole line of t-shirts customized to the individual wearing them. It would take some time. It's a bit of work, but with a lot of the AI tools out there, you can speed things up. If I was generating this artwork from scratch, this would be 40 hours of work for all three designs and then separation after that. With the AI tools, I was looking at more like 10 hours of work and didn't have to draw anything. Recently, I was using AI to generate images against some known brands that had a history of developments that they wanted to be repeated for their new seasonal application. I could provide more variation than ever before, where they would usually get 3 or 4 samples from each artist involved. I was able to produce 28 samples. I learned from that to be more discerning, but it was a larger volume of artwork for them to critique. They picked 6, which was a higher volume than normal, but then they whittled it down and arrived at 2 for their final, and that was not outside the scope of what the people just giving traditional artwork were being chosen for. I was new to the group, so that could be one of the influencing factors. Still, I also heard from several people that the artwork generated by the AI had a sinister quality to it, and that it was almost creepy, which was an interesting perspective, and I'm trying to learn more about that. Recently, I did a search in Midjourney of artwork generated by other users, and I was looking for celebratory artwork, and everything that it showed me was sinister and creepy. OpenAI suggests that 80% of creatives' jobs will be affected by this technology in some way, making artwork faster and more cost-effective for consumers, but diminishing the creative's income. That's something to consider as you progress forward. It's one reason I want to spend a lot of time in this space and bring episodes to share with you, because it will continue to affect all of us. I recently listened to an MIT professor talking about how AI will change everything in the way that we've been contained to this planet. Because of our processing speeds and our ability to understand complex ideas like getting to Mars and outside of our own solar system are slower, AI models that are becoming stronger and stronger, it's very much on the horizon that we will be able to leave this solar system and build ships and equipment to expand our horizons using this technology. It was also discussed about climate change and whether or not we can use AI to affect climate change, and it's certainly possible. The MIT professor warned against making sure that an AI has the same long-term goals as the human race, and what are those goals, and making sure that they're aligned. I think that's one topic that's been pretty consistent through all this discussion and experimentation. It's essential to consider and necessary to bring up that we need to have regulations and understand this technology and define what the long game is. So going back to the heron, I've created a gray underbase, which will hold most of the dark color as it transitions to the shirt. I've got a white underbase. It can either be a halftone or a dither, or it can be the experimental underbase where all 3 versions will be printed on the same underbase. And then there's the RGB variation on top. I have yet to convert to CMYK. I did some experiments converting, and I found that I would have to do a lot of color cleanup. We'll try them in RGB and see if they look good, and then jump back in and do CMYK versions. I'm trying to keep this entire project's time frame short. So traditionally, if I'm saying it's 40 hours plus separations and digital conversions, I'm looking at 60 hours of work to get 3 garments with special effects and samples printed. That's almost 2 weeks. If I'm using AI, I reduce the 40 to 10 hours and I still have the other 20, so I'm looking at 3 to 4 days, which is quite a savings considering that you're making 3 very distinct shirts, including artwork, including printing, for a customer. It's certainly outside of anything that they've done before. If you're looking at it from a completely digital perspective, you're looking at just the 10 hours of artwork and then the sampling on a digital press, which would be much faster. So you could do something like this by tomorrow, for example. Thanks so much, guys.
That's great, it starts with an earthquake.